Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're here to talk about the 1993 horror film Needful Things, and we're also here today to talk about its brand new Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray that just came out. So Needful Things was directed by Fraser C. Henson. It's based on the 1991 Stephen King novel of the same name, and it takes place in Castle Rock, Maine, where a lot of Stephen King novels like to take place, and it actually is produced by Castle Rock Studios. So if you think that the logo doesn't appear in this movie 30 to 40 times, you, my friend, are wrong, because basically this is also the origin story of the Castle Rock lighthouse. That's all in this movie as well. But the basic premise of this movie is Max von Sydow has just gotten to Castle Rock, Maine, and he decides to open up a store called Needful Things. Basically what everybody in the town needs, he has it for them. The one thing that they're craving and wishing for, he's got it there. If you want a Mickey Mantle baseball card made out to you somehow after all these years, well, he's got that for you, and he's going to give it to you. But if you don't have the money for it, that's fine, because he's just going to ask for a favor from you. And that's what he's doing through this entire town. He's asking each individual who lives in this town for a favor as a trade-off for giving them what they want. And Max von Sydow is the standout performance in this movie. Everybody in this movie is overacting their ass off. I mean, even Ed Harris. Ed Harris, I always think of very reserved, but there are points in time where he does overact, and it's weird. It kind of does seem to happen in Stephen King adaptations. If you look in Creepshow when he's dancing, that's overacting city, but there is a lot of that in this movie. He does it himself.
Everybody is insane everywhere!
Very early in the movie and very much towards the end of this movie, he's overacting, but it really does work for him. Same thing with J.T. Walsh. J.T. Walsh is just, first of all, you hate his character so much. He's basically the head of this town, but from the very beginning, we can see that he's just a clear-cut asshole. You know, he's pushing around the deputies, just abusing his power, taking money from the people to help himself get out of a very bad gambling debt, and all the way through the movie, nobody overacts more than his character does, and you really absolutely hate his character, and I hated him by the end of this movie. I actually was rooting for the devil against him. I know that the devil was manipulating him from the very beginning, because that's who Max von Sydow is playing. He's the devil. And basically what that means is he's turning all of these townspeople against each other in a way to just destroy this town. He's done it in other towns. We see a list of everybody who lives in this town, and he's basically trying to manipulate them one by one to take them down. As we see in some newspaper clippings, he's done this in a lot of other cities in the past, and they're basically trying to say that's what the devil does. That's a basic premise of this movie. You know, Stephen King loves his religious allegories. They're all over this movie, but there's also plenty of allegories for other things, you know, like getting in debt. What happens when you get in debt? Eventually, somebody is going to come calling and want you to pay them back. So there are some deep-seated messages and themes in this movie, but it's all told in this very silly, over-the-top kind of horror way. And if you're wondering, what do I think of this movie? I actually really enjoyed this movie, and I always have. I always thought it was a really fun movie. You know, it's not scary or anything, but really you're there for the performances, just to see actors. I mean, Max von Sydow was in The Seventh Seal, The Exorcist, but in this movie, if you want to just see him having a good time, having fun, I mean, this is the kind of movie for that. Nobody in this movie feels like they're taking it very seriously. Bonnie Bedelia, who many people know from the Die Hard movies, is in this. You know, she's actually not overacting. I would say that she's probably the straight-faced one through this whole movie, because she's really the one who's starting to uncover, along with Ed Harris, what is going on. She gets a little bit manipulated, but she never overacts. It's really, the overacting is reserved for guys like Max von Sydow, Ed Harris, and J.T. Walsh. They're the big overactors, but everybody else gets their little moments in here as well. Amanda Plummer, I always enjoy seeing her pop up, and she does a great job in this movie. There is a scene in this movie that involves her dog that is absolutely brutal, and it's really, really, really hard to watch. I mean, I said that this movie doesn't really have the horror elements. I mean, if you're a dog lover like I am, I have 2 dogs. That scene absolutely hurt me. I had to honestly look away. I knew it was coming, and I've known it's coming because I've seen this movie in the past, but I still have a hard time watching that scene. And they make it over the top gory to make it feel a little more comfortable, which is strange to say, but if something is just so over the top ridiculous, it definitely softens the blow. But for me, that still doesn't work. I mean, I still get heartbroken, especially since they linger on her after she finds her dead dog. That breaks my heart, and that's really the hardest part about this movie, in my opinion, because the rest of it is just really fun and loose, and you know, it builds up to a great third act where everything just starts to come undone and it's out of control. And I love the third act of this movie because you don't really expect it to build up to that from what they start this movie at. Everything in the beginning of this movie is just set up for this third act, and I know this movie isn't really loved by a lot of people. I've even seen it at the very bottom of Stephen King adaptations, and maybe it's just because the book itself is more believable as a horror film, but I've always enjoyed the over-the-top Stephen King films. Like, I even enjoy Maximum Overdrive from the 80s. I know a lot of people don't like that movie or just say it's ridiculous and stupid, and this kind of falls into that category as well, but I always get a real enjoyment out of this movie. Don't go into this movie, it's not a thinking person's kind of movie. It's not a movie that you're going to go into this, going to, you know, walk away with some kind of emotions. The only thing you're going to walk away with this movie is, I'm hoping, fun and enjoyment. I hope you enjoyed the watch of this movie, because that's what I did. I enjoyed this movie. I always enjoy watching this movie. Have a good time. You know, for a horror film, it's actually a pretty good palate cleanser, I would say. It's definitely just there to be enjoyed. Everybody in the movie seems like they're enjoying themselves. I don't think it's the best movie that's out there, but I still think it's a movie that you're going to enjoy if you haven't seen it before. It's definitely something that's just a lot of fun. That's the best way to describe this movie. And there is actually a 3-hour TV cut that we're going to talk about once we get to the 4K Blu-ray review, because I know there are big fans of this movie out there. It's very divisive as time has gone on, but I do think it's developed quite a good cult following, and that's why I'm really happy that Kino Lorber has put out this 4K Blu-ray that we're going to talk about right now. But before we do that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, podcasts, lists, live shows, and shorts, we try to do them all here on the channel, and nothing helps this channel out more than by you just simply liking this video and subscribing to the channel.
Pathetic. You're all so pathetic. Look at you. Puppets. All of you.
So here it is, the Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray for Needful Things. And I gotta be honest, I was very surprised that this came to 4K. It doesn't necessarily fit into the Kino Lorber mold, although they have done movies like this in the past that kind of have like a cult following that weren't very popular at the time. I'm looking at movies like Mystery Men. That was another one I was surprised that Kino Lorber did. So this is very much in line with that. And, you know, you get the same Kino Lorber treatment as that. You get a nice slipcover, which I also really appreciate about this slipcover is that you get a different artwork underneath. I'm pretty sure that this is the official poster for the film, and then this one is just an alternate poster, but I really do love this slipcover. Someone pointed out on my Instagram comments when I posted this, it looks like the 4K is trying to get out of the bag, which is pretty cool. It's a good way of thinking about it, so I did really appreciate that. Really nice artwork. When you go inside, so this is actually pretty unique. You get one 4K disc, which is the theatrical cut, which is about just over 2 hours long, and then you have the TV cut, which is 191 minutes long, and that's going to be on Blu-ray. So if you want to watch the theatrical cut, you have to watch it on 4K. There is no Blu-ray of it packed in here. If you want to watch the TV cut, same thing. You can only watch it on Blu-ray. There is no 4K of that packed in here. So the theatrical cut of the movie, like I said, just over 2 hours, and that's going to have your 4K. That's going to have Dolby Vision HDR10 on it. You have your choices of 2 audio tracks. One is a DTS HD 2.0. The other one is a DTS HD 5.1. It's going to start in the 2.0, so if you want to listen to it in the 5.1, you're going to have to switch it over to that. The first time I watched it with the 5.1 track on, I mean, it's actually a really solid 5.1. I don't want to sell the 5.1 here very short because it's actually very solid. There's a good amount of action in this movie, especially in the third act, and it was making really good use of all the speakers, so I was very impressed with that by the end of it. The 2.0, when I tested it on my regular TV here with the HDR10, I thought that was really good as well. Nothing too special there, but, you know, that's probably the original track, so if you're his film historian, Kino Lorber is like a big fan of doing things like that. It's going to start in its original audio track, so if you want to check it out like that. And the HDR10 and Dolby Vision, I was actually a little bit surprised. The Dolby Vision was a little bit better than the HDR10. Usually they're very comparable, but I felt like the Dolby Vision was doing a little bit more work, especially in the third act. That's when this 4K does start to look really good, because overall, it's not the best looking 4K I've ever seen. Now, I have seen this on VHS, and it was pretty rough looking, so if you're going from what it used to look like to now, it definitely looks like a very huge improvement over those previous editions, but there is a good amount of film grain over the entire film in general on the 4K, and it's very noticeable, and there are scenes where the colors just don't really pop off your screen and look very vivid or dynamic, but once they get to the third act, and for the most part it's in the rain, that stuff all looks great. That's when the 4K really shines the most, and you feel like you're getting that true 4K experience. But the rest of the 4K is kind of just I would say this is more in line with like Kino Lorber's release of Marathon Man, where it's not a standout 4K, but it's definitely an improvement over previous versions of the film, especially since this is taking from the original 35mm camera negative, so this is the best it's probably going to look, and they probably just had some bad source material, and that's really it, because when a movie like this is kind of like a scene-to-scene thing, that's usually what I chalk it up to, is they cleaned it up the best they could, and this is really the best that it's ever going to look, and we got to be thankful for that they actually released it, because it's definitely not something that's going to compare to other movies and other 4Ks that are out there that are around the same date of 1993. So don't expect anything like that. It's nothing that's going to knock your socks off or blow you away, but it is definitely an improvement. Now, the TV cut that's on the Blu-ray, that's going to actually be presented in the aspect ratio of 4:3, so it's going to look like a letterbox, look like how it would on TV back in the day. But I was actually very surprised at how much they cleaned up that version. The hour extra of footage, does it add to the film? In my opinion, I would rather watch the theatrical cut, but I do like that they have an alternate opening, because if you've seen the movie, Max von Sydow is driving around in this old Mercedes from like the World War II era, and at the very end of the movie, this is a spoiler for the very end of the movie if you haven't seen it, so if you want to go 30 seconds in the future and do that. At the very beginning of the movie, the car, we see that same car that he ends up getting in at the very end of the movie, and at the very end, it doesn't really ring a bell, like, okay, that's his car, whatever, you don't really think twice about it, but at the very beginning of the movie, on the TV cut, we see Ed Harris in a police chase with that very Mercedes, and we see it blowing up, so when it comes up at the very end, we know, okay, that was his car that we saw at the very beginning. And I did appreciate that stuff in here, but what I really did appreciate was the visuals. I was very surprised at how good looking this Blu-ray was. They really did a great job cleaning that up. The 4K might not have blown me away, but the Blu-ray, for a Blu-ray, was pretty shockingly good. I was very surprised by that, so I can honestly say if you're going to watch the TV cut, yes, you're not going to be able to watch it in 4K. It still looks really good, and I think you're going to be very impressed with it. And if you're a fan of this movie, you're going to want to see the 3-hour version of it, because it's going to add and it's going to, fill some gaps in from the theatrical cut. But, the pacing might feel a little bit off, and that's always what I bump into when you bump into these TV cuts, is that there's stuff there that's to add to it, to make it feel longer, and it might ruin the pacing a little bit. So that's my only complaint about the TV cut, but if you're a fan of the movie, you're definitely going to want to see that. Now, as far as extras go, all you get is one audio commentary track and one interview, and then 3 trailers, one of which is for Cujo, so we know that's definitely coming, or else they wouldn't include it on here. But that's all you're getting. Kino Lorber has kind of always half-assed the extras. It really goes from a disc to disc. I feel like it's really just if they can get the people together to do them, or if they value the movie less than others. Those are the movies that kind of get shafted, I feel like, a little bit on the extras, and this is one of those where I would have loved the making of documentary, because this is a very fascinating film to me, and it's really hard to get some information about this movie, because it really wasn't popular at the time, and like I said, it was pretty much critically panned, so it's kind of forgotten about, but I still would have loved some interviews with guys like Ed Harris, or everybody else who appears in this movie. It just would have been cool to get an interview with just everybody in the making of this movie and what their thought process was about it, or even an interview with Stephen King talking about his thoughts on the film. I don't know, I would have just liked a little bit more extras, because it's really hard for me to get past that when you don't really include that much extras, but they did include 2 versions of the film on 2 different cuts, on 2 different discs, so I can really appreciate that, and it doesn't look like that they half-assed the transfer, and the audio tracks are pretty damn solid. So overall, this is definitely a good purchase. It's just not hitting the highs of what Kino Lorber has done in the past, so this is definitely one I would say, you know what, you probably might want to wait for a sale, unless you're a huge fan of the movie like I am. Like, I would have grabbed this day one, and I'm very happy with my purchase, but it's really going to come down to your mileage with the film. If you're not a huge fan of this movie, but you do eventually want to see it, I say wait for his Kino Lorber sale, grab it through that. It's definitely worth it, just because it is an upgrade over what the film used to look like, and you get some really good audio tracks on here, and again, having 2 cuts of the film is definitely awesome. Overall, I would give this 4K at a score of 1 to 10. I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Before we get out of here today, guys, you guys know that it's Friday. It means it's time for our digital code giveaway. In every video that we post on Friday, we will be doing a digital code giveaway, and that means all you have to do is answer one of the 2 questions that I'm about to ask you in the comment section below, and as long as you do that, you come back to this Monday's video, we put your name on a magic wheel, we spin that wheel 2 times. The 2 names that it lands on, they have their choice of the digital codes that you have seen on your screen before you today. And I figured in honor of this movie being a Stephen King film, I'd ask you guys, what is your favorite Stephen King film adaptation? I think I might have asked that in the past, but I'm not 100% sure. And I'm very curious, especially since we have new people entering the giveaway every week. What's your favorite Stephen King film adaptation? And the star of this movie happens to be Ed Harris. Ed Harris has been a very reliable actor, I believe, since the 1970s, and he always does a great job. He does kind of get typecast a lot, but he's never phoning in the role, whether it be in movies like The Firm or Needful Things or The Right Stuff. He's always been a reliable actor, and I'm very curious, what do you guys think of Ed Harris? What's your favorite Ed Harris film? And guys, don't forget to leave that comment in the comment section below. You don't have to answer both questions. All you have to do is answer one of them, be a subscriber, and then you come back to Monday's video, and we'll see if you are the lucky winner, or at least one of the 2 lucky winners. And anyway, guys, while you guys are down there leaving your comments, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, then after you're done doing all that, just head out in those streets, tell your friends about us. We'll be seeing you around.